So, you want to know where India's caste system came from? The easy answer, the one you learned in a textbook that was probably older than your teacher, is that some light-skinned Aryans on chariots rolled in around 1500 BCE. They conquered the local dark-skinned population, the Dravidians, and said, "Congratulations, you're on the bottom now." It's a neat, tidy story. It has heroes, villains, and a clear beginning. The only problem is that history is rarely neat or tidy. It's a messy, chaotic room, and this Aryan invasion theory is looking more and more like something someone made up to feel better about their own colonialism. The actual origin is far more complicated, and frankly, a much more interesting story of how humans meticulously build their own cages. Let's talk vocabulary. Caste is a Portuguese word, casta, meaning lineage or race. The locals used two different words, varna and jati. Varna is the big theoretical four-part framework, the instruction manual, if you will. It first pops up in a hymn called the Purusha Sukta in the Rig Veda, one of the oldest texts in the world. This hymn describes the sacrifice of a cosmic giant, Purusha. His mouth became the Brahmins, the priests. His arms, the Kshatriyas, the warriors. His thighs, the Vaishyas, the merchants and farmers. And his feet, you guessed it, the Shudras, the laborers. A lovely bit of divine justification for social stratification. The only tiny issue is that most scholars think this hymn was a late addition, a kind of mythological retcon to justify a social order that was already starting to form. Like adding a foreword to a book 1,000 years after it was written, explaining why the author is brilliant. At the top of this divine pyramid scheme were the Brahmins. Their job was to memorize and recite the Vedas, tens of thousands of verses, perfectly. This was before writing was a big thing in the region, so they were basically walking hard drives of sacred knowledge. Their whole deal was ritual, specifically the yagna, or fire sacrifice. You wanted rain, a sun, victory in battle, you needed a Brahmin to chant the right words and pour ghee into a fire. They controlled the cosmic Wi-Fi password. This gave them immense power, not through armies, but through being the exclusive administrators of reality. Forgetting a single syllable could, supposedly, bring cosmic disaster. A fantastic way to ensure job security. Oh, the harvest failed. Well, you must have cheaped out on the ritual ingredients. Definitely not my fault. Just below the priests were the Kshatriyas, the kings, warriors, and general managers of society. They had the swords, the armies, the land. Logically, you'd think the guys with the pointy sticks would be in charge, but there was this fascinating, tense partnership with the Brahmins. The king had the power to kill you, but the Brahmin had the power to tell you that killing was cosmically illegitimate. The king provided protection and patronage. The Brahmin provided divine justification. It was a "you scratch my back, I'll make sure the gods don't smite you" kind of deal. This whole balance was propped up by the concept of dharma. For a kshatriya, dharma wasn't about being a good person. It was about fulfilling your function, to rule, to fight, and to protect the cosmic order. An order conveniently designed by the Brahmins. It's the ultimate middle management squeeze. Then we have the Vaishyas, the economic engine. These were the farmers, the herders, the merchants, the people who actually made things and sold things. They were the thighs of the cosmic man, the sturdy support of society. Below them, the Shudras, the feet, tasked with serving the other three. But here's where Varna starts to fall apart and the more complex system of jati emerges. Jatis are thousands of smaller, local, often occupation-based communities. Think of them as super strict hereditary guilds. If your father was a potter, you were a potter. Your children would be potters. You married potters. These groups, or shrenis, had their own rules, their own councils. It was a form of social organization that probably existed long before the Brahmins wrote their cosmic fan fiction. The Varna system was then draped over this pre-existing reality, trying to fit thousands of messy local jatis into 4 neat theoretical boxes. It didn't fit well. But what about the people who didn't even make it onto the cosmic man's body? The ones outside the 4 Varnas? These groups, eventually known as untouchables and now Dalits, were tasked with the most polluting jobs. Handling dead bodies, tanning leather, sanitation. The concept of ritual purity and pollution became central. It wasn't about hygiene, it was a metaphysical stain. The idea was that contact with certain substances, or people who handled them, could compromise your spiritual standing. This created a 5th category of people, the avarna, who were considered so impure their very shadow could pollute a member of a higher caste. It's a breathtakingly cruel piece of social engineering. You create a system where the people doing the most essential, difficult work are systematically dehumanized for it. It's an ideological masterstroke in pure, unadulterated awfulness. Humans have always been incredibly creative when it comes to finding new ways to be horrible to each other. If the Purusha Sukta was the initial pitch, the Dharma Shastras, especially the Manu Smriti or Laws of Manu from around the 2nd century CE, were the ridiculously detailed terms and conditions. This text laid out the law, the duties, and the punishments for each Varna. And boy, were they specific. It reads like it was written by the most pedantic homeowners association president in history. It dictates who you can marry, who you can eat with, and the precise, gruesome punishments for breaking these rules. For example, a Shudra who insults a Brahmin? An iron nail 10 fingers long shall be thrust red hot into his mouth. But a Brahmin insulting a Shudra? A small fine, maybe. It was all about cementing the hierarchy and removing any social mobility. It was an attempt to free society in a perfect, Brahmin-approved state forever. Spoilers? It didn't quite work, but it did an astonishing amount of damage trying. So, to be clear, this wasn't one single event. It wasn't an invasion, it wasn't a single book, it was a slow, creeping process over 1,000 years. A synthesis of the incoming Indo-Aryan pastoralists' social structure and the pre-existing urban, indigenous cultures of the Indus Valley and beyond. It was a conversation, albeit a very unequal one. The Varna system was a Brahminical ideal, a neat theory they promoted, but the reality on the ground was always the thousands of messy, squabbling jatis. It also wasn't uniform across the entire subcontinent. The rules were stricter in the north, more fluid in the south. Some kings ignored the Brahmins, others embraced them. The system hardened and softened over centuries, responding to economic changes, new religions like Buddhism and Jainism which rejected it, and political upheaval. Anyone selling a simple, single origin for the caste system is either lying or trying to sell you a very bad textbook. The system was already ancient and deeply entrenched, but it got a terrible booster shot with the arrival of the British. The British Empire had a pathological need to categorize, census, and label everything. They loved putting people into neat little boxes. When they encountered the bewildering complexity of thousands of jatis, they looked for a simpler framework. And they found one in the ancient Brahminical texts describing the 4 Varnas. So they used this theoretical model as the basis for their census. They formally recorded everyone's caste, often solidifying identities and hardening boundaries that had been more fluid before. In their quest for administrative efficiency, they took a complex, dynamic, and oppressive system and made it a rigid, well-documented, and even more oppressive system. It's a classic case of trying to fix something by pouring concrete all over it. A truly masterful display of colonial management. Ultimately, the origins of the caste system are a grim testament to the human need to create order, even if that order is monstrous. It's a story of ritual purity, economic anxiety, gatekeeping knowledge, and the slow codification of prejudice into divine law. It wasn't one bad guy's idea, it was 1,000 little decisions, 1,000,000 accommodations to power, a slow drift into a social structure that has caused incalculable suffering for millennia. And the most exasperating part? This urge to classify people into us and them, to build hierarchies and police the borders, is not unique to ancient India. We are all descended from people who were really, really good at it. A comforting thought, isn't it? If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!